Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Welcome back out to the garage on a very cold day. Today I'm going to get stuck right in on Barney, my wife's 1987 Honda CMX 250 Rebel, and I'm going to continue where I left off, which was making fender struts. In a previous video, we re-radiused the fender with a shrinker stretcher dies and got it all ready to go and fit to the radius and the contour of the rear tire. Also notched it out so it fits around chain guard. So I'm going to carry on with that, and I'm going to continue making the struts, and we'll see how far we get. You have to forgive the background noise because it's about 4 degrees outside Fahrenheit. It is really cold today, so the heater's going in the garage. As you can see here, I went ahead and I did a little bit more welding here to try and blend this in better, and then I ground and sanded the original factory weld and also my fender strut tab there, and did that on both sides. And you can see this side as well. You know, we just blended in the welds on the tab that we made, so it looks a little nicer. And when this is all painted, you know, a lot of these imperfections here, it'll go away. I mean, I don't have the greatest welding skill, and I also don't have a TIG welder, I have a MIG welder. So it's as good as it's gonna get, or as good as I can do it, but I am trying to make it better. I need to measure where these standoffs are gonna go. Right now I've got them held temporarily in place with these rare earth magnets. Mark and drill the through holes, and then I'm going to use the bolts to hold them in place so that I can tack weld up the strut and make sure it's exactly where it needs to go. I've got a little bit of a straight section on the strut, the basic part of the strut that I made up, and it's going to weld on like that. I don't want to use the full radius end because it's going to pitch it back too far, because I want this to kind of come up. I want it to make a sissy-bar, you know, kind of like that. You know, I think I want it to end at about the height of the seat. I mean, if I let go of this, the rare earth magnet's going to suck that sucker to the fender, and it's going to push everything out of position. I'm going to use these magnets again when I get ready to mount the fender strut on this side. Right here, where this little tiny bit of the radius is I think where I'm going to put the spacer. I got to watch these rare earth magnets, man. They'll take your finger, the skin right off your finger. I think we'll do 10 millimeter. Which is right about there. I'm 10 millimeter from this edge, and I'm also 10 millimeter from here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use my scribe to mark the fender, and then I'm going to center punch it. But I'll have to, you know, take the fender off the bike to do that. Then I also need to figure out how I'm going to deal with the front too. But I think I'll drill the holes first, and we'll get the back mounted. Then I'll do the front fender mounts. This seems to be more critical. I've got the front of the fender clamped in there pretty damn hard, so I don't think it's going to move around on me. But I need to get these in the exact position I want, so I got to fiddle around with it a little bit, and then we'll jump back. So I got the spot measured now, figured out exactly where I want the hole to be for the standoffs, and now I just got to, you know, center punch them, and I'm going to use a corner here. I'm not sure how well that's going to come up on video because I want to center punch them, but I don't want to friggin' dent my fender either. I need 3 hands, he says. Do the other side. This side's way easier. I can just rest it on the welder. There we go. Now I just got to drill it out. Then we're gonna just kiss the holes with a countersink just to deburr. Now I got my through holes done on the fender. It's time to weld up the the actual fender braces themselves. So I'm using these little mild steel standoffs I got at the hardware store, and this is one of my test pieces. If you look at it, it's kind of off-centered, even though I knew this was perfectly in line with this piece of steel. The reason why is because I only tacked it on one side, and when I went to fully weld it, the heat caused it to bend over. So by doing this test, I now realize that before I can remove the sissy-bar once it's tacked up onto the fender on these little standoff mounts, I need to make sure I have a good tack on both sides before I go and I weld it up. Because I didn't spend a ton of time, but this is what I'm shooting for. I'm not going to be able to stack dimes with my welder simply because of the fact it's a 110 welder, it's not a 220 welder, so it doesn't have enough amps to put out. So I have to bevel the edge of the bar stock, the round stock, so that I can get the weld to penetrate, but not put too much heat into it to where this melts. Because if you look at this end, which was with the wrong settings of the welder, it just blew slag everywhere. It melted through. So I did about 3 of these, which was 6 test pieces with just scraps. That was my first, and this was the last one. So you can see there's a pretty big improvement there. And I mean, there's no setting on the welder that tells you how to weld this thinner steel to a piece of solid bar stock, round bar. So you just have to figure it out. And the key was beveling it. So not only do I have to bevel the round bar, but I also have to make sure that I tack it completely on both sides before I pull the whole assembly off to fully weld it. So now comes the fun part. I'm going to have to put this in place with magnets, because what I'm shooting for is I'm trying to get the way this radius is up to match this radius here. And once I get it, I'm going to tack this side in place. Then I'm going to mark a center line down the center of the fender, figure out where that intersects the top of this, and then chop it. Then I can swing the other one up, mark it, cut it, and then, because they have to meet at the top, it's going to be fun. Because I've never done this, and I'm having to figure this out as I go. I do have a little tool that's going to help me figure out where to cut it, though. But I got to get one side mocked up, prepped, and then I can tack weld it. I've got a laser line projected here, trying to shoot down the center of the tire, the center of the fender, and a balance between the center of the seat, the steering stem, and all that. That's going to be my reference point for when I make the sissy bar. I've got the rare earth magnet on the fender, and it's got enough magnetism to hold that in place there. And down here, I've got the same thing, rare earth magnet. It's also acting as a spacer, so I can tack that. And I've got all my parts cleaned up. So it's the moment of truth now. I gotta tack weld these bad boys in place. Alrighty. Safety third. It's tacked. It ain't pretty. Now that I get it tacked, I'm going to put some more welds down and begin the metal finishing process. That way I can get this side done, and then once I'm happy with it, I can do the other side. Or if I suck at it and it's terrible, I can toss it and then try it again. Wish me luck. All right, so I promised right from the start with this series of videos that I'd show everyone the good, bad, and ugly. I wasn't going to hide anything. So that is a disgusting weld, but there's a method to my madness. I got a lot of spatter. Even though I cleaned everything and I did the best I can, the problem is, I don't know if you can see right there, this tube is thin going into very thick metal, so I got to blast it. And I've got a gap to fill too. Now, that is what it's going to look like. That is a strong weld, even though it doesn't look that good, because, I mean, look at the color. It's that I have to build up the layer. Now, if I had a TIG welder and the experience to use it, I can do stacked dimes on that and it would look beautiful. But instead, I'm going to build up a blob over the top of my solid tacks, and then I'm going to file it back a little nicer than this, but that's what I'm going for right there. A nice, smooth radius transition. So hopefully I get there. Now begins the process of filing all my booger welds down. It's gonna take a while. After grinding and filing and sanding with, I believe we got 180 grit. So after much sanding, that's the end of my Fender strut. You can see I've got this nice radiused edge here, and I blended it in, and any little tiny pores, and I've got a couple, because it's hard to stack your welds and then clean it and stack it and clean it. You're always going to get a little bit of impurities just because of the residue left over from the subsequent welds. But that's going to look pretty good, once it's mounted on the bike. Now I got to do the same thing with this. And believe it or not, I didn't have to add any additional welds to that. That one actually came out pretty good. I'm happy enough with that dude right there that I'm going to leave it alone. And let me tell you, on my test pieces, I beat the living hell out of it with a hammer, and it wasn't coming off. So it's definitely strong enough to hold it on there. But that's the reason why this is so much fun. Is this is thin and this is really thick. So it's a challenge to weld, especially when you're not you're just an amateur. You're not an expert welder. But I think this is going to turn out just fine. Once this thing's powder coated, any of those little imperfections are going to be gone. They'll get filled in, and that'll all just look blended together. It'll look pretty nice, I think. I have the welds blended and filed and sanded for the lower part of the Fender strut, and also the upper part here. I got a little bit of porosity there, but again, I'm not going to chase that with the welder because the powder coating is going to fill that in. So I've got my laser pointed to the center of the steering stem bolt, sort of on the center of the fuel cap, because Honda didn't actually center the fuel cap perfectly on this CB5 550T tank. Then it's centered as good as I can get it on the seat, because the stitching, it's a handmade seat, so the stitching isn't perfectly centered. But the fender is pretty much centered with the tire tread as far as the laser is going to tell me. And the reason why I set this up, let me see if I can get right behind it here so the camera doesn't get parallax error, is because I need to find the intercept line for the sissy-bar, which is going to be, I don't know if you can see it in my hand here, but I could just make out the laser right here. That's the intercept point. So I'm going to cut that on the laser line so it's a flat plane, vertically down the center of the bike. So when I make the other fender strut, it'll come up and meet it at a point to make a mini sissy bar. Man, I could just barely see that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shut the lights off in the shop here. The back wall light will still be on, and then I'll be able to see this laser a little bit easier. All right, that's way better. I'm going to have to, clearly I'm going to have to make sure I cut on the generous side of the line. All right, I think this makes a lot more sense. So you can now see the laser line going down the middle of the bike. And if I get in here close enough, see the laser line on the sissy bar. So I'm using that to, again, mark this vertical plane where the center line goes through, and that's where I'm going to chop the end of this end of the sissy bar, and then I'll do the same thing on the other side once I fit it up, weld it, and then as long as they're extremely close, I can clamp them together and then run a bead of weld through there and then metal finish it. And then I'll have a nice Fender Strut sissy-bar, which is what I'm looking for, with a cool compound radius curve on it. So that's my line there. And kind of what I did, I don't know if you can see here, I held my Sharpie vertically above and below, and then I let the laser line shoot down the length of the Sharpie, and as long as that was straight, I knew that the line I was drawing was on the, let's call it the laser datum point for this vertical plane I'm shooting. But that's going to be the point, the peak of my sissy bar / Fender Strut. Alrighty, I have now gone and cut this thing off with the death wheel, and you can see I've saved my line, and it's just about perfect on the laser. Now I've just bolted this back up. I haven't really checked too much. Looks like the fender's slightly off center. So when the fender is not mounted in the front right now. That's the only attachment point. I haven't got the other side done, so I got to kind of square it back up, and then that little tiny bit that the laser's off will be back on my center line. But that is, there's going to be another end coming down here, and that's going to be the sissy bar. And hopefully, if I do this right, hopefully that's going to look pretty cool. I think it will. All right, just like before, I'm using my rare earth magnets to hold this in place. And now is the fun part. Let's see if I can describe this to you. You can see where they're supposed to meet, but I can't just cut this at the laser point because it's currently offset by its own thickness. So I have to actually guess the convergence angle, leave myself just a little bit of extra material, pre-cut this guy, and then just grind it until they meet in the center on the laser line. So that's the next challenge. But you can kind of see where it's going here, right? That's going to look pretty sleek. See if I can show you what I was talking about before. See how I can see the laser on the Sharpie? So if I press these two guys together, and I keep the Sharpie vertical and I keep the laser on it, I can draw this line. Not easy because it's freaking curved, even on the underside. And that should be a straight slice through that part. Now let's cut it and see how good I am. Alright, so here's my initial cut. And also, I don't know if you can see that, I've remarked it where I need to cut it again because they don't meet up. Now that I've got this sanded up and fit, and I've got this joint here where the two halves of the Fender Struts meet to make the sissy bar, I'm ready to throw in the tack welds. I have a really high-tech professional metal clamping device here in the form of a clothespin to hold the tip together. Now, I won't weld this until after I metal finish the two standoffs, as it were. And I've got it measured out so that they're matching each other. And of course, you saw the laser line earlier. The trick will be to weld this up and then finish weld it, build up the tacks to make a kind of a blob, as it were, and then grind and file it down to make a nice smooth transition like I did on this side. That will look really sweet once it's powder coated. So yeah, this will be interesting. Never made one of these before, so got that side done. Let's see if I can do this side and not screw it up. So one of the issues I ran into when welding on the bike was that because of the way I'm kind of stacking these spacers, like, at a very small amount of surface area along this metal part, I don't have a hell of a lot of ground. And I don't know if you noticed in the video, I was sending quite a large arc out it wasn't as clean of a weld as it should be. And it's because of not having a good enough ground, but because of how I don't know if you can see this here. The way that's barely touching, you know, where those are intersecting each other, that's pretty much causing my spatter issue because of lack of ground. I mean, the parts are clean. They were cleaned with degreaser. They were sanded, smooth, and cleaned. I mean, you can see how smooth this piece of metal is. So I've done everything I could to promote a good weld. But with all that said, it's tacked. They're not coming off. They're in the right place. I've wire brushed them down now, even though, you know, it's kind of an ugly weld. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to just burn in stacked up just little tack welds overlapping on top of each other until I've got enough weld material built up around here to sand a smooth contour into it. I stacked up a bunch of tack welds, and I mean, I got more spatter up here because my dumbass forgot to brush off the soot from the previous layers, so I had a little spatter. But this is actually better than it was when I did the first side, and I've got a really nice blend transition. So the next bit's going to be a whole lot of filing and grinding on this bad boy to get it as nice as this side, and then we can weld the peaks together. So now comes the boring part. I got to go through and I got to grind down part and get it ready to put back on the bike, and then I can do the tack weld of the 2 points of the sissy-bar / Fender struts, and hopefully get this thing done soon. So after a whole lot of sanding, grinding, filing, using various bits like this mill bit for a Dremel, and just like the other side, now the side with the chain drive is welded. It's metal finished as good as it needs to be for powder coating. And my point is still on center line. I'm on center line all the way up to the steering stem. So the next task at hand will be to tack weld the top and bottom once I clamp this together. And then this part is done. And then I gotta figure out how I'm going to mount the front edge of the fender, and then the rear fender will be completely finished. I think that looks pretty damn good. So yeah, now that I got that side swung out of the road, I just need to brake clean this off. There we go. I learned the hard way that my fingers tend to rust everything out. So when I'm done working for the day, I wipe this stuff down and then I put WD-40 on it to keep it from rusting, since it's all still very much bare metal. And I'm trying to make sure that I get this super clean. I got a pretty tight fit, but my welding, it's okay. But with the welder I have, the Hobart Handler 140, it just doesn't seem to want to weld this round bar that great. It's pretty thick steel for that welder because it's just a 110 welder. Again, at some point in time in the future, I'm going to buy a multi-process welder. But I don't have the money for it. Maybe if this YouTube gig kicks off and it pays something, I doubt it. All right, let's bolt this dude back up. When I get ready to final sand these parts, I'm actually going to sand some additional material off my washers here, because on the finished fender, when it's been painted, I actually have neoprene and Delrin washers that I'm going to use to help space the fender strut off of the painted surface, because I don't want to crack or damage the paint when I bolt it up for good, when it's all nice and painted or powder coated up. And that little bit of squish from the neoprene washers and the Delrin washers is going to be just enough to keep it from digging into the paint, because it could chip it. Now it'd suck after all this work to ruin a paint job. So I got everything's cleaned off. I've got a pair of vice grips on here to hold the parts together and flat and as centered as I can get it. It's kind of hard to clamp those two parts up. Magnet's not going to work, so I got to stab a couple of welds there. Probably one on the point. I'm going to have to reproduce this point because as I weld it, the steel's going to melt down, and so I need to build up a bunch of weld blobs along here, like, you know, stacked tacks, so I want it to look exactly the way it does now without the weld after it's welded. So it's going to take a couple passes with the welder, filling in voids and stacking tacks in order to get enough buildup of metal that I can grind and file it away and then hand form it and shape it so that it looks exactly like this. So, wish me luck. I gotta get a bigger hat. This thing is way too tiny for my big fat head. Well, now comes the incredibly boring task of grinding all this crap off now that it's cooled down, and then filing it and sanding it and grinding it and filing it and sanding it until eventually it looks, you know, nice and metal finished, kind of like these do. And then this part will be done, finally. I didn't want to grind it right away. I'll let it cool for about 20 minutes. You know, it's cool to the touch. Because if I put too much heat into it, it could warp. Then all the work I put into this, making sure that all my angles were right and I got the radius correct, would be for nothing because I would just, you know, it would just warp. Heat's my enemy here, and I got to keep it in check. Alrighty. After a lot of grinding, this is what we got. So now I just gotta sand it with 120, and then maybe go up to 200. I don't know. I haven't done the final sanding on this part. I'll do that when I send it out for powder coat and try to get it as shiny as possible, level. They're gonna sandblast it anyhow, but look at that bad boy. Woohoo! Almost as if I actually know what I'm doing. Yeah, that's a good one, Mike. I'll do the old put my hand in front of it trick there. But I'm still going to finish sanding this, but I'm going to do that all in one batch when I have all the other parts built and I need to sand them up. And then I'll make a determination whether I want to Cerakote this or powder coat it, because Cerakoting is very thin. It actually kind of soaks into the metal structure. And so, you know, little tiny voids between my tack welds that the powder coat wouldn't give a crap about, you would see easily with the Cerakote. So I might do powder coating. But anyhow, that came out excellent. I mean, can you believe that this was just round bar stock from the local Ace Hardware? And then I made a custom sissy-bar Fender strut for Barney. So let's put it on Barney and see how it looks. And now the moment of truth. I know I've shown this a few times already, but check it out. Again, I'm on the center of my steering stem, down the center of the fender, center of the tire. The laser is right on the money. I mean, it is right on the peak of the sissy-bar. Pretty sweet. I am going to have to bend it out a skosh because I think when I put all the heat into this area, it kind of shrank up a little bit as it was cooling off, but that's pretty easy to fix, and I don't have to bend it that much, so it should be fine. Better to do it now, make sure it fits loosely, than when there's paint and powder coat on things and then it chips and breaks and cracks, and it'd be a nightmare. There's this center rib here that's on the fender, and I have to straddle that. I can't just make a flat piece of metal that sits on the surface. So I'm going to use these little hardware store steel spacers again, and I'm going to straddle them on either side of the center rib on the fender. What I'm going to do is I took this piece of wire, I bent it up to the radius that I think will look good, and see if I can do this so y'all can see it. There you go. So it's going to form like a U shape, and it's going to straddle the center rib of this fender here. I wonder, in the grand scheme of things, just how many damn times I'm going to have taken this fender on and off the bike. All I did was just make a parallel line of the swing arm, because it's at an angle, and then mark the crown of the bead of the fender. And now I need to measure out where I want the standoffs to go. I should now be able to just lift this guy off. Won't need my wedge block anymore. So you can see the foam. And right there's my mark. So what I need to do is figure out the spacing I want to do. This is my wire template, and just by eyeballing it with my square, I'm going to measure off of the side of the bead because it's pretty symmetrical. It's too hard to get my ruler to stick on the crown of the bead, and plus this nice sharp line here on either side, so it's a good spot to measure. And it looks like I'm going to be about 35 millimeters from this edge. So as long as I make it symmetrical, and I'm using my my carpenter square here, just because I want to make sure that I'm 90 degrees off the center of the bead to either side of my position mark there. So if I take these little metal standoffs here, and I kind of eyeball that where it's going to go, then that's 35 millimeters from the edge, not from the center. I should clarify that. From the opposite edge of the bead. Anyhow, it's really just to give me reference points to make sure I'm putting both of these guys in the same spot on either side, so it's even. Because I'm going to fit the part I got to bend up out of the round rod to fit wherever the position of these are. And I want to keep it narrow to the bead, not get too wide on how it's mounted, because if I go over too far, I'm going to start running into the chain guard and other parts. And if I go too far this way, I'll start running into the brake actuator arm, and it's better to keep it narrow, and I'm still trying to make it look good at the same time. When I center punch these, I was very light. I don't want to leave divots in my fender. So let's get the holes drilled in here. Last step is to deburr. I'm just going to scuff this back real quick with a Scotch-Brite just to clean up the area, make it look nice. I'm going to hit it with a light coating of WD-40. I'm just also noticing I got a couple high spots I'm going to have to work out when I go to finish body work in this, but that's a future mic problem. So what I've done here is I've taken my standoffs and I just bolted them in a sacrificial bolt. I need the surface clean so I can weld on it cleanly to, well, make it not spatter so much. And to do that, I just take the spacers and I just chuck them up in a bolt and put a nut on the end of it. And then put it in my drill, just hit it with Scotch-Brite. That cleans up the surface. Then I can weld on it and not have to worry about it. These are stainless, it'd be one step to polishing it. See, just a couple seconds, them suckers are perfectly clean. And once I clean them off with some brake cleaner, they'll be good enough to weld on. When I get these mounted, then they gotta go back on the bike, and then I can start mocking and fitting up the what do we gotta call this? The front mount for the rear fender. Take this, with the old fender mounts. Slip them back on, Barney, and then bolt it all back on. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for, except for that's going to be round bar. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to have that U sitting on top of the spacers, or if I'm going to try and miter them directly. It's pretty much pushing my fabrication skills to try and miter that, but we'll see. The first hurdle I got to overcome is I need to form this shape out of this material here, this round bar, and it's pretty thick, and that's a tight radius, so let's see how I'm going to pull this one off. I bought this tool years ago from Eastwood. It is just a flat bar, round bar bender, and you can put different dies in there to get different radiuses on it. So now I'm going to try and strong arm this in one shot and bend it around the die. Boy, if that wrench would have broke right there, it would have busted me in the face. Where's my little piece here? I think that'll just about do me. I got a skoshie more to go. There we go. Whew. That's a workout. Alright, I don't see any damage on my tools. So that's a bonus, because I'm going to be using this for the front fenders for sure. There we go. And if I did my job right, I have just about the same radius. When I get this cut, I'm going to actually set it in the belt sander, and this edge here I'm going to sand flat, I think. I don't know. I'll hold it up to the mount on the bike that's currently mocked up and figure out exactly what angle I want to do the final cut. Boom. Now you let that sit till it pulls off, because it is screaming high. This is what I worked out so far. What I ended up doing was this bracket right here, I bent out a little bit instead of it being up at 90 degrees, and I decided I'm going to fully weld it on the bottom so that this bracket looks flat on the top, and then it curves up on either side. I think it looks a lot better, especially with the welds on the bottom. And that's kind of, if you look at this over here, that's kind of how this is. The spacer standoff is kind of on top of the round bar, and so I'm just kind of mimicking that right here. So I've got some rare earth magnets holding that in place, and I've got a little wedge of aluminum pushing it up from the bottom, so I could actually fully tack weld this in place. And when I'm done, this will all be finished welded and blended in, kind of like I did, you know, with this. And up here, same situation here. I'm going to go and fully weld all this after I get it tacked in place, and then I'm going to file it, sand it, grind it, sand it, file it, you know, on and on until it's all radiused and blended in. Now that I'm looking at it, this almost looks like the Starship Enterprise minus the saucer section. But that'll be a cool mount, I think. It'll do the job and it'll be unobtrusive. That's what I want. So I got this off Barney now, and this kind of resembles either the Starship Enterprise, or it reminds me, I guess because of this curve, the speeder from Star Wars with Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke, and the droids, you know, going across Tatooine. Anyhow, it's the front mount for the back fender, and now that it's tacked in place, now I got to do the finish weld and then stacking all the tacks. I'll probably only film a couple seconds of me doing that. It's gonna be boring, But yeah, I'm gonna stack the tacks, and then this will go in for the old grind and sand and file and grind and sand and file until it looks like something that resembles a nice finished part. After way more grinding and filing and sanding than I care to friggin' talk about right now, this is the result. It kind of looks like a spaceship, but then again, like the shape of it came organically, and it does a job. Really, it looks nice. It kind of matches this this kind of flow that I got here to the sissy-bar Fender strut. And now, for the first time, Barney's TC Brothers Fender is mounted and supported by the swing arm. And it looks great. I'm really happy about the outcome. Like I said, it was kind of organic in nature. And it looks the part. It really does. That is just a bunch of hardware store mild steel, some hardware and some spacers that I welded up and sanded. Now, I mean, there are some like little sanding marks and stuff like that. I don't actually need to finish it too much more because I think I made the decision I'm going to go with this this hammered bronze powder coat, and a lot of those small imperfections will actually just disappear. But you know, I think if I do the hammered bronze from the wheels in the Fender strut and this mount, and then when I get to the front end, you know, the front mount there, then maybe something on the front end, like let's say, you know, I don't really want these to be chrome. I might drill some holes in the headlight bucket mounts, dog ear mounts, whatever you want to call those. I haven't decided yet. The handlebars getting swapped out, so there are some things that are going to change as far as finishes and the way things are going to get mounted. But the rear fender's done. I can move on. I am happy with all of that. It is all finished well enough that, with the exception, I still got a metal finish a little bit more of the fender. I noticed I've got a couple of high spots from the shrinker stretcher die that I have to work out. But currently, that's good enough for now. So, in the next video, we're going to work on the front fender. Thank you for watching. It's much appreciated. If you can give us a like and click on the bell notification, that will let you know when we have new videos coming out, and also it'll push us up in the search results, which I really, really appreciate. I'm hoping to do more videos in the future. Certainly there are going to be more Barney videos. There's going to be more videos on some other bikes also. Maybe I'll start a new project. I don't know. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, but I definitely appreciate every one of you. Also, one last thing, if you have any suggestions for Barney, any ideas, you know, drop a comment in there. The more you guys comment on the videos, the better it does in the search results. And I read these comments, and you know, it may influence what I decide to do with Barney going forward in the future, because this is really just a fun project bike for Melly and I. We kind of do what we think looks cool. It's not designed, any of the stuff we do on a bike's not really designed for, like, you know, a daily rider. It's just custom work to make a really cool one-off bike out of an old Honda 87, you know, CMX 250 Rebel that would have been just beat the hell up and maybe abandoned, you know, in some scrap yard somewhere. But instead, Barney is going to be a cool bike. We will ride it. We'll enjoy it. We'll never get rid of it. We love the bike too much. So again, thanks for watching. And until we see you guys again, ride safe.